Hello, we are on module 3. Welcome. We're going to learn about querying a database. One of the main things I kind of want to get across is what a SQL query is, and then kind of the interface that Access has for you to create queries. Now, of course, when we think about a database, the query is probably one of the more important parts because it's how we get information from the database. You remember I was talking about in a past video how, we have two programs running. Access is running, and then look at all my scribbles. Access is running, and then we have the back end of the database that runs, and the language that is used to speak between them is your SQL language. And that's pretty much what we've got and what we're working with. Now, you don't necessarily see that separation between the graphical interface that you're using in Access and the database that's actually behind it because of the way Access is built. It's built to be simple to use a database, and it's kind of the first actual implementation of a graphical interface for get information from databases or working for the database. So, back to that kind of, this would be the database, and that's an executable or some kind of library, but that's going to be the actual, the thing that listens for actual requests for information or to put information in. And so then this is the Access front end, what you mostly work with, but you see, you don't see a lot of that back end database because you're mostly working with the front end. And of course, the language that you're using to talk to that database is SQL. And any database that you're working with uses SQL, the query language, and it's kind of interesting. We're talking about queries, and it is in the name, structured query language, and it is language. It's expressions. It's a programming language. It's very close to a programming language in the fact that you can give it rules and it'll fall out and complete those rules of the data you want or the data you want to insert into the database. And so working with Access, we don't see a lot of that. So that's what I'm going to be kind of focusing on, is uncovering that. And we'll go into, we'll build a query, something simple. And then I want to show you the back end code that's actually produced to access the database from the query itself. So as we do, let's hit some of these PowerPoints. A lot of this is just kind of user information on how to actually do things. But one thing that we want to use the query language for is here, finding data and entering data and deleting data, modifying the data and all its parts. And that's what the query gives us. And it's how we actually interface with the data. Now, when we build a query in Access, it gives us a graphical interface, but it's just building a SQL statement in the background. That's all that interfaces with the database that Access uses. And I think it'd be a good idea because to look at some examples of some SQL statements. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. And I'm just going to throw it into a Google search just as a kind of a discussion, but SQL statements, and you can just do a search for SQL statements, and you'll get so much information on how SQL statements are made. So such as this one, hey, select a column from two columns, customer name and city from customers, and it would return all those rows. So here is what I like to tell students when it comes to databases. And I always kind of come back to it. When you're working with databases, you design tables, you design columns. I design tables, I design columns, and I fill rows. Or I get rows. That, or I design more columns or add more columns. You can actually add columns with the SQL statement. You can do everything that you need to do through SQL statements. And there is so much here. I mean, just look at all the insert into. This would be how you insert into a table. So it's a whole language that exists, and it only exists to work with the database. So Access actually has to use SQL. So when you're working in it, it's building the SQL that talks to the database. And that's part of what we're going to uncover today as we're discussing it. But yeah, there's so much that you can do with SQL statements because it's the only way that you can actually work with the database. So here's create the database, some primary key, we got actual SQL examples that we can look at, and logical operators. So a lot of what you're working with when you are learning SQL is a programming language. The similarities are very much the same. So operations such as and, or, and not operators, we'll talk more on that, but these are part of your SQL statements that are going to be getting generated for you in Access. There's a wizard there, essentially that you use to kind of nicely walk your way around this minefield of programming, because the whole idea of working with Access and the reason why it was developed is so that people didn't have to write the SQL code. It would be kind of intuitive and graphical. And we've got web interfaces that do the same thing, but still the idea is, hey, we're actually working with SQL. That's the thing that it actually does the magic behind the scenes, that actually interfaces with the database technology, which mostly what and I do talk about it a lot, but mostly what I would like you to get the most from this course is that back end. What is a database? How do you interface with the database? How do database tables relate? All that kind of, those are the most important parts of this for your ensuing classes. Not necessarily getting lost in the minutia of working with that front end Access interface. However, it's intuitive, and it's like Word. When I use Word, I always forget how to use crap. And I go, it's really simple. Sometimes I forget, and it's just always, you can throw it to Google. you know, and it'll just pop up what you need to do, and you do it. That's the new world in a lot of ways, and SQL is just the same now because we've got a artificial intelligence that will just say, hey, this is what I want from this table. Generate the SQL statement for me, and it does. It's incredible. I love it. Uh, and so it's just another step from the Google days. You know, when Google first came out, every instructor was about to lose their bloody mind because they couldn't believe that so much information was available at the click of a button. And we're seeing the same thing, but now with artificial intelligence, which I just consider is like a super search engine. It's just one that gets you to it quicker. And actually do stuff for you, which is even cooler. But yeah, I'm getting off topic here, so let's not go down the Chat GPT rabbit hole. Let's let's get into the actual interface, and there's some examples here on working with queries where you can just do all these different things with the interface or a SQL statement. You can, you know, display specific records, you know, rows. And that's another thing. So you design columns, you design tables, and you request rows or you fill rows. So that, you know, when we are working with selected fields, we have to say a table and the column that we want, and then we get the rows. And of course, you know, hey, we may want to actually perform some kind of processing, some kind of mathematical formula, you know, something on that data, and we want to show it somewhere as well. And we don't, you know, the data that we calculate, we don't actually want in the database. We just want to show the data and have it in some kind of calculated, you know, somewhere where we can work with it and interact with it. And that's what Access gives us, is the ability to get rows, calculate rows, show the answer of those calculations without putting data back in the database. So, you know, you would just build a column and it would hold data. Find, display, update, generate, all that stuff. And that's what this interface gives us. So one thing that we will do when we work with the query is selecting the tables that we are going to ask for information. And this is the main deal when it comes to generating your query. And there's a lot that you can do from this interface. This is the wizard, essentially. And creating and running your query, most of what you're doing in here after you select your tables, then you can start being specific about what you want from each table. And not only that, but you can put some logical operations in there. So they have different rows here for, you know, hey, what is the column, what is the table, do you want to sort, you know, should I show this information in the window after I get that information? Then you got all kinds of other boxes that you can put other stuff in, like some logical operations. Okay, I think we're getting into just a little bit where we can move along to, you know, actually doing a query and looking at what happens in the back end. So bear with me here. I think we're going to use our last example table, and we're going to build a query on this table right here. Okay, so we can create a query by going to create query wizard. Then we can have query design. So this one will help you. Well, what we want is we want query design. That brings us into this kind of this type of example. And we'll see here we kind of have an empty box, and then we have all those columns I was showing you in that PowerPoint. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the table, and you see over here it says add tables. And what I want to do is I want to add more volunteers, and I believe I just double click on it. Yeah, there we go, double click on it. And here is that table that I can get information from. Oops, why is that popping up? Okay, whatever. So this would be where, you know, I would now decide what information I want from my query. Then I can also apply some rules to it. All right, let's say that I just want to print first name and last name. That's all I want from the query. I just want to get the data that is first name and last name. So what I'd go do is I added the table. Then I would go down here and I would choose to show some rows in a column. So what this is why did that do? Okay, there we go. What column? What do you want to show in this column? What do you want to show in this column? What do you want to show in this column? And then it fills the rows of the query. When you run the query on the database, it will create a whole nother, and using the term create another query or another table is a strong term, because every time you look at the query, you can save the query, but the query is just a result of the SQL statement. It's not actually a table, it's a query. That means you're getting the information and you're displaying it. And this is, you know, hey, what information do we want? You select the row, and then how do we want to display it? Now that also goes in with, you know, all the different conditional operators that we can have on something being true or false. So I want the first name for the first row, and that table more volunteers. Then I want the last name. Looks like this is got some issues. Let's do this. There, I just clicked on the last name. Yeah, I'm gonna restart this because there's some weirdness going on here. Let's just do a no on that. So if you start seeing weirdness, I started seeing some duplicated records there. Okay, I think it's because I added the table twice, but that's all right. So, you know, I can go down here and select, you know, exactly which column I want to show, first name, or you can go up here and just double click and it'll put it in for you. And so that's what the niceness of this interface. Now, so what we've done is we said, okay, I want all first name and all of the last names in the table to show up in these two columns. And when I run it, that's what actually ends up happening. Now I can save this query. I can save this query, and I can give it a name, query 1, and it will always be over here for me to run again. So you can think of this query as another table, because you can just convert it to a table real quick and make the query a new table. That's possible. But remember, it's just the result of the data you're asking for from the actual tables. And here's the other thing that I wanted to show you, kind of like behind the scenes type stuff. When we go back to, when we want to look like edit this query, we'll go to design view, and let's say that I wanted to add another column. And, you know, I can save this, Control S, I think, or just file save, just save would do it up here. It would update the query one. But when we run it, it's going to run with the other table. But here's the thing that I wanted to really kind of show you is you're actually just generating, working with this tool, you're just generating a SQL statement. And so when you go up here and you flick between the result of the query, the actual design of the query, you can look at the SQL of the query. So that is actually what's going on. That's what's happening right there. We're saying select these columns, more volunteers, first name, from the table more volunteers, last name, street, from more volunteers. And that statement just says, hey, give me all of them. All that data, every row in all these columns. Just give me all the rows in these columns. Now we can actually put a criterion there. And what we can do then is let's just, you know, I'm going to go in here and let's say that we wanted only the records that came from 98225. So we got a lot of 98225s, and then we got 98226s. But what if we wanted just all of them from 98225? Well, we go to our query, and we would go to design view, and I would need to look at the zip file to be able to act upon the zip. So I need to add the zip to one of the columns I'm asking for, because after all, my criterion is going to be on the zip. So I'm going to add that down here, and then what I can do is I can go in here and I can determine with this criteria only the rows that I want. So I'm asking for columns, but not only that, I'm saying now I want only the rows where this matches. And since we know we're always already comparing it to zip, so I only want the zip of a specific number, and that means that I know that it's going to be compared against the zip because that's the column I'm in. I'm going to be in this criteria box, and this is where we can do a logical expression. We can say I only want the rows where it matches this rule. And so a lot of this has some, essentially it's a simplified form of if statements in a programming language. And so you have the ability to check for values between ranges. In fact, let's look at some examples. This is just some examples of some queries that we can do. We can say, is the data greater than 25 and less than 50? There's all kinds of different rules that we can apply to it using logical operators. Now, logical operators are the less than, the greater than, the equals, the not equals. Yeah, okay. let's talk about logical operators. You got the equals. That means, is it equal? Is it equal? Now in programming we use two equal signs. We don't in Access. We just use the equal. There's the less than, there's the greater than. There's the and, because after all, we may need to want it to be, less, greater than, what was the example? It was over here. It was a good example. Greater than 25. So we want, and the syntax is kind of interesting here because you see how, there's a blank here. So what they're saying is when x is greater than 25 and is less than 50 and x is less than 50. Okay, now I did this wrong. Where x is greater than 25 and x is less than 50. That's kind of the idea here, where x is the data. So in that terminology, x is the zip code that we're dealing with. And so these logical operators all work based on true and false. So when you join two of them together, like you're saying x must be greater than 25 and x must be less than 50. The zip must be greater than 25 and the zip must be less than or 50. But since we already know that we're applying it to the zip, we omit this x because it's already in there. So we don't need it as part of the expression because that would be the zip. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to say, hey, when x is equal to that one number, whatever. So, and of course, the x is going to be omitted because I already know I'm applying the zip to it. So I'm just going to go down here to the criterion and I'm going to say x zip when zip is equal to 98225. Then I'm going to hit enter and I'm going to save this and then I'm going to look at the SQL view before I even run it. So look at what they did there. So I don't think they've got this so that you can zoom in. It's too old of technology. But you've got select these columns from this table, but only where the zip is equal to 98225. And so we're only asking for the rows where the zip has that value. And that's the query that we've just built. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to data sheet view and when I go to data sheet, oh my God, oops, data sheet view, we will see that it already ran the query and we only have zips that are 98225. Okay, then you're saying, okay, well, Mr. B, what's this all about logical operators? What is this with the and the or? Oh my goodness, this is too much. Okay, let's get some more chicken scratches going on. Let's just kind of get into it. It looks like I'm having challenges on erasing my board here for some reason. They moved things around on me and I'm doing this the hard way. So let's get some chicken scratches. Let's say that we want where x is equal to, and what's that number that we're using? 98225. Where x is equal to 98225. And we're going to use the logical operator or here, not and, excuse me. Or I'm going to do 98226. And so what that looks like is when zip is equal to 98225 or 98226, or wait, whoops. Or it's equal to 98226. And oh, I forgot to do the zip here. Or zip is equal to 98226. This and that. So when we're working with ORs and we're working with logical expressions, what it comes down to is one is a true. So you're gonna use values, and we can do like when x is greater than 9, and x being like the zip number, this is the zip column, and they say, hey, this zip is greater than 9. That returns a true, or a 1. 0 is a false. So when you apply these logical operators, and you implement an OR statement, what you're going to have with the OR is a 1 or a 1. A true or a true is a true. Only 1 or a 0, it's equal to true, because it's like this one or that one has to be true. So in this case, this has to be true or this has to be true, and then we grab that data. 0 or 1 equals 1, and 0 or 0 equals 0. So if none of them are true, if this one or that one is not true, then we don't grab that data. We only grab the data when one of them matches, and that's what this truth table is for. If they both match, yes, we get the data. If one is true or the other is true, because 1 or 0 is a 0 or a 1 is a true. So this could be a 0, a false. This could be a true, and the whole thing's true. This could be a true, and that could be a false, and then the whole thing is true. So that's the OR true statement. Now we got the other one, that's the AND. So when we use AND, we would put, instead of OR here, we'd put AND. Sorry about my chicken scratches, but you know, so it'll be 1 and 1 equals true. So in this case, this has to be true and the other one has to be true for it all to be true. We're going to say 1 and 0 is equal to 0 because they both have to be true. This has to be true and that has to be true for the whole thing to be true, and we grab that data. This is going to be 0 and 1 equals 0. They have to both be true. If this is false and this is true, the whole thing is false. A 0 and a 0, of course, if they're both false, then everything overall is false. And here's the crazy part. We can have more than one logical operator. We can have this. X is greater than 9, or X is greater than, or you know, less than 0, and then we can throw another or in there. Or X is equal to 3. So we only grab rows where X is greater than 9, or X is less than 0, or X is equal to 3. That's the only time that we grab the rows. And so you would put that criterion omitting the X, because we already know it's zip. We already know what X is going to be referred to. It's zip, because that's what the interface has us working with. So I've just put in my first one, X equals 98225. What if I want this to be, okay, X is greater than or equal to, you're going to use the equals in there, 98225, or x is equal to or equals 9. So you see how we're omitting the x? Let's see if I'm actually doing this right. 98226. Okay. So yeah, that worked. 98229, 98226. But you see there's no 98225? That's because in our rule set, what I said is only give me the rows that are greater than 98225 or the row equals 98226. So this statement right here, you know, it's the syntax and semantics of it are a little bit difficult, but as long as you know that the reference that you're doing, that you're working with the algorithm is, let's just actually hit Word up here on this one. What is omitted is the zip vi. So this is actually, this expression is actually x being the zip is greater than 98225 or x is equal to 98226. And of course x is the zip because we're working in the zip column. But we omit that when we put it into access. We omit this part of it. We get rid of this part of it. You know, we take that out and that's what we enter. So yes, it's kind of a stink when it comes to visualizing what's actually going on. But again, no matter what's going on in the front end and using these silly wizards that are very old and access specific, meaning it only works within access. What is truly universal is the SQL statement that is generated from using that wizard, the access wizard. That's what's important. And we have all kinds of SQL statement wizards out there for all kinds of different for all kinds of different implementations of a database. And so this is what actually is happening in the query, is that statement. Nothing else is going on. And it's grabbing the data from that statement and throwing it into our rows. So we're essentially asking for columns. We're asking for specific rows within those columns with the where statement. So what I would do, what I would suggest that you guys do is spend some time just kind of perusing what SQL statements are and kind of get some examples to wrap your head around it. That, you know, working with SQL statements is not where you're headed in this course. You're headed with kind of understanding the background or the lower level knowledge of what a database is and how it interacts. And then you're going to be working with coming up with your own SQL statements eventually when you get into ensuing courses. So right now you're going to be using the wizard. And in fact, throughout this whole course, you're going to be using wizards to generate your SQL statements for your queries. And there's all kinds of different queries. And there's all kinds of different ways of implementing them using the Access front end when ultimately all you're doing is generating a SQL statement. So I wanted to give you guys that information today on working with queries because it's fairly important to understand. Let's add in another one. just for giggles. Let's say that we say OR is equal to 98225. So we can chain them together, and it will evaluate them from left to right. It'll evaluate this first, then it's going to return the number of it. It's going to say, hey, is this true or not? 1 or 1 is equal to, well, what is it? So then it answers that and let's say it's true. Then it takes that true and it completes that last one on it. That's operator precedence and associativity within programming languages, and how logical operators work, and logical expressions with logical operators. Excuse me, they're logical expressions. The logical operators are the or and the and the less than, the greater than. So let's throw that in there just for giggles. Just for giggles. Yeah. Let's go to design view and let's add in up here or equals 98225. Okay, it did some auto editing for me. I'm going to save that and then I'm going to run it. And there is our 9225 right there. Okay. All right, guys, and the and works just like that, where they all have to be true. Every expression in that sequence, logical sequence, has to be true with the and operator. Unless you do something like this, which just kind of, I can say if it's greater than 9225 and it's equal to 9226, or it's 9225. So what that does is the AND operation has to happen first. And let's say that is a false. So let's say that 9225 and 98226 it doesn't hit those. So it returns a 0. And then it'll do a 0 or is it 9225, and then it will only come out true for 98225. So each of those operations happen from left to right, and I'm talking about the logical operators, the or and the and state, the or and the and statements. But yeah, that's kind of the main hit out of this. The main idea out of this chapter. Let's look through the PowerPoint and see if there's anything more. A lot of this is just dealing silly stuff like looks and how things look. Now another one is you can do things. You can do this calculations, so you can create whole other data fields with a calculation of the data. So we call that a calculated field. So you can actually take the data and add information or add values to it, such as, if you just want to add 1 to the value if it's a number, you can actually do processing with that. And you use the expression builder to do that when you create a calculated field. Now you're going to get, some use on actually doing that, on creating calculated fields within your tutorials. So I think we're at a point where we're good. Play around with those calculated fields. Get comfortable working within the query designer. Thank you. Bye.